I walked in to find my daughter on the floor, clutching her arm. "He's a boy," my in-laws said. She must have said something. They forced her to apologize to her cousin who hit her. I smiled, picked her up, and left without a word. 2 days later, they got a call that changed everything. The bruise on my daughter's arm wasn't just a mark, it was a scream. A silent, purple testament to something so deeply wrong, her small voice couldn't even begin to articulate it. And I stood there, rooted to the pristine Persian rug in Judith Faulkner's opulent living room, my blood running cold as I watched the matriarch of the family force my Ivy to apologize to the boy who'd inflicted that very injury. She provoked him, Judith purred, that practiced smile, the one that had intimidated me for years, glued firmly to her face. In that single, agonizing moment, something inside me crystallized. A quiet, simmering rage I'd never dared to acknowledge, let alone unleash. For years, they'd seen me as Delilah, the gentle illustrator, the peacekeeper, the malleable one. The woman who made pretty pictures and never rocked the boat. But they'd forgotten something crucial about gentle creatures. When you threaten their young, they become the most dangerous force on earth. I didn't utter a single word that day. I simply walked out, my daughter's trembling hand clasped tightly in mine. The Faulkners, I knew, thought they'd won. They always did. But they had no idea. My silence wasn't surrender. It was the terrifying, distant rumble of war drums. The crisp autumn chill had settled early over our small Oregon town, painting the maple trees outside my kitchen window in breathtaking shades of amber and crimson. I took a slow sip of my coffee, my gaze fixed on my 8-year-old, Ivy, as she meticulously packed her overnight bag. It was for a weekend at her grandmother Judith's estate, a ritual that always brought a subtle tension to our small, cozy home. Her movements were careful, almost hesitant. "Don't forget Mr. Whiskers," I reminded her, nodding towards the well-loved stuffed cat perched on her bed. Ivy simply nodded, tucking the plush toy carefully between her folded pajamas. "I'm Delilah Wren, a freelance illustrator and full-time single mom. My life is a beautiful, chaotic blur of deadlines, colored pencils scattered across my desk, and a constant, unwavering focus on making sure Ivy feels secure despite the fractured family situation we navigate. Ever since my divorce from Ronan Faulkner 3 years ago, I've walked a tightrope, desperately trying to maintain some semblance of family connection for Ivy's sake, while simultaneously trying to set boundaries with people who had never thought I was good enough. "Do I have to go to Grandma Judith's?" Ivy asked, her voice barely a whisper, pulling me from my thoughts. "Can I just stay with you this weekend? I could help with your new project." I knelt beside her, tucking a strand of her chestnut hair behind her ear. "Honey, I know it's not always your favorite, but family is important. Besides, your cousins will be there. It's cousin weekend, remember." Her eyes dropped to the floor. That hesitation, that small, telling gesture, should have been my first warning. The Faulkner estate was a sprawling, 3-acre testament to old money and impeccable image management. As I pulled my 10-year-old Honda into the circular driveway, I saw Judith standing on the front steps. Her silver hair was perfectly coiffed, her arms crossed, as she appraised my modest car with thinly veiled disdain. "We were beginning to wonder if you'd forgotten," she said, her smile tight as she swept her gaze over Ivy's jeans and sneakers. "The other children are already dressed for dinner." "We're right on time, Judith," I replied, checking my watch. 5, as agreed. Judith ushered Ivy inside with a proprietary hand on her shoulder. "Well, hurry along then. Cashin has been asking when you'd arrive." At the mention of Cashin, I saw Ivy's shoulders visibly tense. Cashin was Judith's golden boy, her other son's child, a 10-year-old with a dazzling smile for adults, and, as I was beginning to suspect, something entirely different for other children. "Is Ronan here?" I asked, following them into the marble-floored entryway. "He's on a call," Judith dismissed, waving a manicured hand. "Business doesn't stop for weekend visits, Delilah." "Of course not." My ex-husband had always prioritized the family investment firm over everything, including his marriage and, increasingly, his daughter. In the 3 years since our divorce, Ronan's actual time with Ivy had dwindled to these obligatory family gatherings and the occasional lunch he remembered to schedule. From the back patio came the faint sound of children playing. I glanced through the French doors and saw several kids running around the manicured lawn. Cashin stood apart, watching two younger children on the swing set. Something about his posture, even from a distance, made me profoundly uneasy. Maybe I should say hello to everyone before I go, I suggested, trying to delay the inevitable. Judith's hand fluttered dismissively. They're fine. Children need to learn to socialize without parents hovering. As if on cue, a sharp cry echoed from the patio, followed by tearful protests. Through the glass, I saw a small boy, one of Ronan's cousin's kids, on the ground, while Cashin stood over him. Cashin, Judith called sharply through the open window. Help Tyler up now. Then, turning to me with that infuriatingly tight smile, she added, boys will be boys. Some children just need firmer hands than others to learn proper behavior. The comment hung in the air, a thinly veiled accusation. My parenting was the soft kind, the lesser kind. I knelt to hug Ivy. Goodbye, sweetheart. Call me if you need anything, okay? I'm just a phone call away. Her arms tightened around my neck. Can't you stay? Just for a little while. Ivy, Judith interjected, her voice sharp. Your cousins are waiting. Your mother has her own plans, I'm sure. I didn't actually. My weekend would be filled with work and quiet, gnawing worry. But I'd learned long ago that arguing with Judith only made things worse. I'll see you Sunday evening, sweetheart. We'll make brownies when you get home. Ivy nodded, her eyes downcast, as Judith guided her toward the patio doors. Just before they stepped outside, I heard Judith murmur, now, remember what we talked about. No tattling about little disagreements. Family handles things privately. That knot in my stomach tightened, a familiar, unwelcome guest. But I pushed the feeling aside. I'd spent years doubting my instincts in this house, years of Ronan telling me I was overreacting, overthinking, over everything. So I smiled, I waved, and I left my daughter behind. For 2 days, I buried myself in illustrations for a children's book about brave forest animals. I checked my phone constantly, but Ivy didn't call. By Sunday afternoon, I couldn't wait any longer. I arrived at the Faulkner estate a full hour before the agreed pickup time. The front door was locked, but I knew the family would be gathered in the back living room or patio, as they always were on Sunday afternoons. I walked around to the side gate, entered the code I still remembered, and made my way quietly across the stone pathway. Voices drifted through the open patio doors. Judith's commanding tone. A child sob. And then, words that stopped me cold. You need to apologize to Cashin right now, Ivy. You provoked him. Boys don't just act that way for no reason. I stepped through the doorway. The scene before me burned into my memory, searing itself onto my soul. Ivy was sitting on the floor, holding her arm against her chest. Cashin stood over her, arms crossed, a smug, sickening expression on his face. Judith kneeling beside Ivy, her hand gripping my daughter's shoulder. Say you're sorry for upsetting him, Judith insisted, her voice an icy command. Ivy looked up, saw me, and her eyes instantly filled with tears. Mom, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. What happened? Judith straightened, her composure never faltering, a testament to years of careful performance. Just a little disagreement. Ivy took Cashin's game without asking, and he got upset. We're resolving it. I crossed the room in 3 steps, my heart pounding like a drum in my ears. I gently helped Ivy to her feet. Let me see your arm, sweetheart. She reluctantly extended it. My breath hitched. A clear, angry red mark wrapped around her forearm, the undeniable imprint of fingers. It was an accident, Judith said smoothly, her eyes darting away from the bruise. Children play rough sometimes. Ivy needs to learn that her actions have consequences. I gathered Ivy's belongings with one hand, keeping the other protectively around my daughter's shoulders. My mind raced, a furious whirlwind of all the accusations I wanted to hurl, all the rage I wanted to unleash. But Ivy's trembling body against mine kept me focused. She was what mattered. We're leaving, I said, my voice barely a whisper, yet it cut through the air like a knife. Delilah, There's no need for drama. Judith's voice hardened, her face pinching with irritation. This is exactly the kind of overreaction that I turned to her, cutting her off with a look that, for the first time, actually silenced even the formidable Judith Fallner. We're done here. As we walked out, Cashin called after us, his voice dripping with malice. Bye, crybaby. Judith didn't correct him. She simply watched us go. In the car, Ivy stared out the window, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. It wasn't until we were home, safe in our small but warm kitchen, that the whole, horrifying story finally spilled out. It's not the first time, she whispered, her voice catching, still so small, so fragile. Cashin pinches me when no one's looking. He pushed me down the last time too. Her voice dropped even lower, barely audible. Last month, he locked me in the coat closet for almost an hour. Each word was like a knife twisting in my heart. Why didn't you tell me, baby? Grandma Judith said I shouldn't be a tattletale. She said I need to be stronger and stop provoking him. Dad said the same thing when I tried to tell him. I held her close, my mind reeling. All those times she'd been reluctant to go for visits. The way she'd grown quieter after weekends with the Fallners. How could I have missed it? The signs were there, I just hadn't allowed myself to see them. That night, after Ivy was finally asleep, I documented everything. I photographed the fading marks on her arm. I wrote down every detail she'd shared, every past incident. And I made a solemn promise to myself and to her. Never again would I ignore my instincts. Never again would I let anyone hurt my child and call it normal. The next morning, I called my friend, Mavis, one of the best family lawyers in the county. I need your help, I told her. And I need you to tell me honestly if I'm overreacting. After hearing everything, Mavis's response was immediate and firm. You're not overreacting, Delilah. You're finally reacting. 2 days later, Judith Fallner received a visit from Child Protective Services. It was just the beginning. You have absolutely no proof of any of this. Ronan's voice crackled through my phone speaker, cold and dismissive as always. Cashin is a normal, active boy. Ivy has always been sensitive, like you. I stared at the photos on my kitchen table. The fading bruise on Ivy's arm. The scratch on her back she'd shown me the night before. This isn't about sensitivity, Ronan. It's about safety. It's about you trying to drive a wedge between Ivy and her family, he countered, his tone accusatory. Mother told me how you stormed out yesterday. How you're blowing a simple children's disagreement into some dramatic crusade. I closed my eyes, fighting the familiar, insidious pull of self-doubt they'd always been so good at instilling in me. Your mother forced our daughter to apologize to a boy who hurt her. Tell me how that's okay. Cashin's just a boy, Delilah. Boys play rough sometimes. Ivy needs to toughen up a bit. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, memories washing over me. How many times during our marriage had Ronan minimized my feelings? How often had Judith stepped in to explain why I was wrong? Too emotional? Too much? I'd spent years shrinking myself to fit into their world. And now, they expected Ivy to do the same. Not anymore. The next morning, I sat with Ivy's school counselor, Miss Winters, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. Ivy's been quieter lately, she confirmed, reviewing her notes. Her teacher mentioned she stopped raising her hand in class about 2 months ago, and she's been drawing some concerning pictures during art therapy. She showed me several drawings, dark scribbles overwhelming smaller figures, a tiny girl locked in what looked like a box, while a larger figure stood guard outside. Has she talked about these? I asked, my throat tight. Not directly, Miss Winters replied gently. But when I asked her about feeling safe, she said she feels safe at home with you and at school. Miss Winters paused meaningfully. She didn't mention feeling safe at her father's family's home. By the time we finished talking, Miss Winters had made her position clear. I'll need to file a mandatory report, Miss Wren. What you're describing, combined with what we've observed, warrants investigation. That evening, I started a journal, documenting everything I could remember from the past year. Every reluctance Ivy had shown before visits, every change in behavior afterward. I dug through my phone for old photos, looking for visual shifts in my daughter's demeanor around her father's family. The evidence, once I began looking for it, was heartbreaking. In every photo with the Fallners, Ivy stood slightly apart, her smile tight, her body angled away from Cashin. How had I missed it? We often see what we're conditioned to accept, Mavis told me when I showed her my findings. We were sitting in her office, surrounded by case files and towering law books. The Fallners have spent years training you to doubt yourself. I let her down, I whispered, shame washing over me. No, Mavis said firmly, her eyes kind but resolute. You're standing up for her now. That's what matters. She helped me organize everything, the photographs, the school reports, the detailed accounts from Ivy herself, collected carefully and gently without leading questions. Document everything, Mavis advised. Every call, every text, every encounter. The Fallners will fight back, and they'll fight dirty. She was right. 2 days after Child Services visited the Fallner estate, the backlash began. First came the text from Judith, I'm disappointed in your tactics, Delilah. Bringing strangers into family matters shows your true character. Then, a call from Ronan's lawyer, subtly suggesting that my unfounded accusations indicated parental alienation, a threat. So thinly veiled it might as well have been transparent. That night, as Ivy slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, my phone lit up with Ronan's name. You've gone too far, he said without preamble, his voice laced with cold anger. Mother is beside herself. Do you have any idea how this looks for the family? I'm not concerned with how it looks, I replied, my own voice surprisingly steady. I'm concerned with what happened. Nothing happened. His voice rose sharply. Cashin and Ivy had a normal childhood spat. You're turning it into something perverse, because you've always been jealous of my family. I let his words wash over me, no longer feeling the sting they once carried. Ivy told her counselor everything, Ronan. Not just about this weekend. About the closet. About the pinching. About being told she deserves it. Silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. If you push this, he finally said, his voice hard, I'll file for full custody. I'll tell the court you're mentally unstable, that you're poisoning our daughter against her family. My mother knows every family court judge in this county. Then it's a good thing we're not filing in this county, I replied, repeating what Mavis had told me earlier. Goodbye, Ronan. The next week passed in a blur of appointments, Ivy with her new therapist, me with Mavis, both of us together with a family advocate assigned by the court. I took time off work, letting some deadlines slide, focusing entirely on protecting my daughter. Miss Wren, Ivy's teacher, Mrs. Bennett, caught me after school one afternoon. She glanced around to ensure we were alone before continuing. I want you to know that I've noticed the changes in Ivy too. If you need a statement for any proceedings, I'm willing to provide one. Thank you, I said, surprised and profoundly grateful. That would mean a lot. She hesitated. There is something else. Last fall, after a weekend with her father's family, Ivy drew a picture during free time. I found it concerning enough that I kept it. She handed me a folded piece of paper. I thought you should have this. The drawing showed a small girl, clearly Ivy, huddled in a dark space while a boy stood outside, his face drawn with an exaggerated, malevolent smile. Written across the top in Ivy's careful handwriting were 2 chilling words, the bad place. That night, I added the drawing to my growing file. Then, an unexpected email arrived. My name is Emma Pearson, it began. I worked as a nanny for the Fallner family 2 years ago. I've heard through mutual connections about what's happening with your daughter. I've seen what they're capable of, and I'll talk. The cafe was nearly empty when Emma Pearson slid into the booth across from me. She was younger than I expected, maybe mid-20s, with anxious eyes that darted toward the door every few minutes. I signed an NDA when I left, she said without preamble, keeping her voice low. But I can't stay silent anymore. Not after hearing what happened to your daughter. How did you find out about Ivy? I asked. Small town, Emma shrugged. Plus, I still babysit for the Hendersons, who are friends with your neighbor. Word gets around. She pulled out her phone. I kept everything, even though they told me to delete it all when they fired me. She showed me a series of text messages from Judith, complaints about a child who had visited the estate being too sensitive and causing problems for Cashin. The language was eerily similar to what had been said about Ivy. Cashin locked a little girl in the basement during a birthday party, Emma explained. When she finally got out and told her parents, Judith insisted the girl had gone down there herself and gotten scared. They fired me the next day for allowing it to happen, even though I was upstairs helping with the cake when it occurred. Did you believe the girl? I asked, my voice tight. Emma's expression hardened. I knew she was telling the truth. Cashin had done similar things before, breaking toys and blaming other children, pushing kids when adults weren't looking. But Judith and the whole family protected him. They called it high spirits or said the other children were lying to get attention. By the time our meeting ended, Emma had agreed to provide a sworn statement to Mavis. It wasn't conclusive evidence, but it established a pattern and, more importantly, showed that Ivy wasn't the first. By the way, if you're still with me on this roller coaster of a story, please hit that subscribe button. More unbelievable, inspiring, and sometimes terrifying stories are coming your way. The following morning, I received a certified letter from Ronan's attorney. He was, indeed, filing for full custody, claiming I was emotionally unstable and coaching Ivy to make false accusations against family members. The hearing was set for the following month. They're moving fast, Mavis observed when I called her. They want to overwhelm you, make you feel like you can't win. Classic intimidation tactics. Will it work? I asked, a fresh wave of fear gripping my heart. Could they really take Ivy? Not if I have anything to say about it, Mavis replied firmly, her voice radiating confidence. Remember, we've moved this to a different jurisdiction. Judith's connections don't reach as far as she thinks. Still, the Faulkners' campaign was relentless. Ronan's sister called mutual friends, painting me as vindictive and unhinged. Judith reached out to the parents of Ivy's classmates, subtly suggesting playdates be cancelled because of our difficult family situation. Even my landlord received a thinly veiled call suggesting I might become an unstable tenant. They're trying to isolate us, I realized aloud during one of our strategy sessions with Mavis. It's what abusers do, she agreed. Cut off support systems, make the target feel alone. But they've miscalculated, Delilah. You're not alone. She was right. For every person who pulled away, someone else stepped forward. Mrs. Bennett rallied a quiet group of teachers who had observed Ivy's changes. My clients expressed support, with several offering to testify to my character and work ethic. Even my typically reserved parents flew in from Arizona, ready to stand beside us. Through it all, Ivy slowly began to emerge from her shell. In her therapy sessions, she found her voice, expressing feelings she'd been taught to suppress. Her nightmares decreased, and she started drawing bright, hopeful pictures again. You're doing the right thing, Mom, she told me one night as I tucked her in. The simple validation from my 8-year-old daughter brought tears to my eyes. 2 weeks before the custody hearing, Mavis called with news that changed everything. Remember how Emma mentioned a little girl Cashin locked in the basement? I found her family, the Watsons. They were paid off. A hefty settlement with ironclad confidentiality clauses, but they're willing to break it to help Ivy. Why would they risk that? I asked, stunned. Because Mrs. Watson still regrets taking the money and staying quiet. She said her daughter had nightmares for a year afterward. Mavis paused, her voice hardening. There's more. The Watsons weren't the first family to be paid off. There was an incident at a private camp 2 years ago. Another boy, Cashin, hurt. Those parents took the money too. The revelation sent shockwaves through our case. With Mavis's guidance, we amended our filings to include this new information. The court appointed a guardian ad litem, an independent advocate, to represent Ivy's interests and investigate the claims from all sides. Predictably, the Faulkners fought back even harder. Judith gave an interview to the local paper, portraying Cashin as the victim of malicious rumors and herself as a concerned grandmother trying to protect her family from my vendetta. The article included a carefully staged photo of Cashin looking angelic beside his grandmother. The comment section, however, told a different story. People who knew the Faulkners began sharing their own observations, nothing specific enough for legal action, but enough to create doubt about the family's pristine image. Public opinion is shifting, Mavis noted. People are beginning to question the Fallner's narrative. But the real turning point came from an unexpected source. During a court-mandated family therapy session, a last-ditch attempt at reconciliation before the hearing, Cashin's mask slipped. The therapist had asked each person to express their feelings about the situation. When it was Cashin's turn, he looked directly at Ivy and said, his voice chillingly flat, "She's a liar. She's always been a liar. And when this is over, she'll be sorry." The threat hung in the air, so explicit that even Ronan looked uncomfortable. The therapist immediately documented the interaction, and the guardian ad litem, present for the session, requested an emergency hearing. That night, as I tucked Ivy into bed, my phone pinged with a message from an unknown number. When I opened it, my hands began to shake. It was a video clip, security footage from inside the Fallner estate, clearly showing Cashin pushing Ivy to the ground and twisting her arm while Judith watched from the doorway, doing nothing to intervene. The message below read, "Judith had these cameras installed last year, but forgot they saved to the cloud. I can't come forward, but I couldn't let them win. Good luck." I immediately forwarded it to Mavis, who responded within minutes, "This changes everything. Call me first thing tomorrow." As I sat beside Ivy's bed, watching her peaceful sleep, I felt the first real hope in weeks. The Fallners had built their empire on silence and fear, but cracks were forming in their foundation. And through those cracks, the truth was finally breaking through. The security footage played on Judge Eleanor Harlow's computer screen. The silence in her chambers was broken only by the soft ticking of an antique clock on the wall. Mavis and I sat across from her desk, barely breathing as we watched Cashin push Ivy down, twist her arm, and walk away laughing, while Judith stood in the doorway, witnessing everything, doing nothing. When the video ended, Judge Harlow removed her reading glasses and pinched the bridge of her nose. "How did you obtain this footage, Miss Carson?" Mavis straightened. "It was sent anonymously to my client, Your Honor. We believe it's from the Fallner's home security system." "Anonymously?" The judge's tone was skeptical. "And you have no idea who might have access to the system?" "No, Your Honor," I answered truthfully. "But the metadata confirms it was recorded on the Sunday in question, and the faces are clearly visible." Judge Harlow tapped her pen against her legal pad. "This changes the complexion of the case significantly. I'm ordering an emergency hearing for tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp. I want all parties present." Outside the courthouse, Mavis squeezed my hand. "This is it, Delilah. The footage corroborates Ivy's account exactly. Even the Fallners can't explain this away." I wanted to believe her, but years of being undermined by the Fallners had taught me caution. "They'll try. Judith always has an explanation." "Not this time," Mavis said with quiet confidence. "Not with Judge Harlow. She's known for protecting children above all else." That night, as Ivy slept at my parents' house, safely away from the storm brewing around her, I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. For weeks, I'd been keeping a private journal online, documenting our journey through this nightmare. Tonight, after careful consideration, I made it public. I didn't name names. I didn't share the video. I simply told our story. How a mother discovered her child was being abused by a family member, how the powerful family closed ranks, and how the system could either protect or fail the most vulnerable among us. I titled it, "When They Tell You to Apologize for Being Hurt," and posted it anonymously on a parenting forum before going to bed. By morning, it had been shared thousands of times. "Did you see this?" Mavis texted me, sending a link to a local news site. My story had been picked up by a reporter who specialized in family court cases. The headline read, "Anonymous Mother Fights Wealthy Family Over Alleged Child Abuse." My heart raced as I read through the article. Though no names were used, anyone who knew the Fallners would recognize the description. The reporter had done additional research, interviewing child psychologists about the dynamics described and adding context about how financial privilege often influenced family court outcomes. "I didn't expect this," I told Mavis when we met outside the courthouse. The morning was crisp, the sky a clear, hopeful blue that seemed at odds with the tension of the day ahead. "Sometimes the truth needs witnesses," she replied. You gave people permission to see what often happens behind closed doors. Inside the courtroom was more crowded than I expected. The Fallners had arrived in force. Judith, stone-faced and elegant in a tailored suit. Ronan, looking uncomfortable but determined, and their lawyer, Harrison Wells, a man known for representing the town's elite and their most delicate matters. I was surprised to see Cashin present, sitting beside his grandmother, wearing a blue blazer that made him look like a miniature businessman. He caught my eye and smirked. The gesture chilled me. Judge Harlow entered, and the proceedings began with a formality that belied the emotional charge in the room. Wells spoke first, immediately objecting to the video evidence. Your Honor, this footage was obtained illegally and should be inadmissible. Furthermore, we have reason to believe it has been edited to present an incomplete picture of events. Judge Harlow raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting the video has been doctored, Mr. Wells? Not doctored, Your Honor, but selectively edited. What happened before this incident is crucial context. What context, Mavis countered, her voice calm but razor-sharp, would justify an adult watching a child assault another child? Wells ignored her, addressing the judge directly. Mrs. Fallner was just entering the room and hadn't fully assessed the situation. These children have a history of rough play. What looks concerning to an outsider is simply part of their normal interaction. Judge Harlow's expression remained neutral. I'd like to hear from Mrs. Fallner directly on this matter. Judith took the stand with practiced grace, smoothing her skirt as she sat. Your Honor, I love both my grandson and my granddaughter dearly. What you saw in that video was unfortunate, but it was the culmination of an afternoon of provocation. Ivy had been teasing Cashin, taking his belongings, challenging him. My blood boiled at the lies, but Mavis's hand on my arm kept me seated. And your response to seeing your grandson push and twist the arm of your granddaughter was to have her apologize to him? Judge Harlow asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Judith didn't flinch. I believe children need to understand their role in conflicts. Ivy needed to recognize that her actions have consequences. So, you're teaching her that being physically assaulted is a natural consequence of what you call teasing? For the first time, Judith looked uncomfortable. That's not what I meant, Your Honor. Then what did you mean, Mrs. Fallner? Before Judith could answer, the courtroom door opened. A middle-aged woman I'd never seen before slipped in and took a seat in the back row. Something about her entrance caught Judge Harlow's attention. Let's hear from Ivy's court-appointed counselor, the judge said, shifting gears. Dr. Morgan, please take the stand. Dr. Emily Morgan, a child psychologist who had been working with Ivy for the past 3 weeks, approached the witness box. After being sworn in, she spoke with quiet authority about her sessions with my daughter. Ivy exhibits clear signs of anxiety specific to interactions with her cousin Cashin and her grandmother Judith. She has described multiple incidents of bullying and physical aggression from Cashin, and perhaps more disturbingly, a pattern of adults dismissing her concerns and forcing her to accept the abuse as normal. Objection. Wells interrupted, leaping to his feet. Dr. Morgan is presenting hearsay from a child who may have been coached. Your Honor, Dr. Morgan responded, before the judge could rule. I've been evaluating children in traumatic situations for 15 years. I'm well-versed in recognizing coaching. Ivy's accounts have been consistent, detailed, and accompanied by emotional responses that cannot be faked by a child her age. Judge Harlow nodded. Objection overruled. Please continue, Doctor. Dr. Morgan described how Ivy had created a sand tray scene during therapy, a recognized technique for children to express emotions they can't verbalize. She created a scene with a small rabbit surrounded by wolves, with adult wolves watching but not intervening. When I asked about it, she said, "This is how it feels at Grandma's house." The testimony continued with Dr. Morgan explaining the potential long-term impacts of normalized abuse on a child's development. As she spoke, I noticed Ronan shifting uncomfortably in his seat, refusing to meet my eyes. Next came Emma Pearson, the former nanny, who testified about what she had witnessed during her employment with the Fallners. Despite Wells's attempts to discredit her as a disgruntled ex-employee, her accounts aligned too closely with the established pattern to be dismissed. The most powerful moment came when Mrs. Watson took the stand. The mother of the little girl Cashin had locked in the basement during the birthday party. We were paid to keep quiet, she admitted, her voice shaking. We signed documents and accepted money because we were told it would be better for our daughter to move on. I've regretted it every day since. Judge Harlow leaned forward. What made you decide to come forward now, Mrs. Watson? She looked directly at me. Because I read that blog post. I recognized the situation immediately. I couldn't let another child go through what my daughter did, knowing I could have spoken up sooner. Throughout the morning, the Faulkners' carefully constructed facade continued to crumble. Teachers from Ivy's school testified to the behavioral changes they'd observed following weekends with her father's family. The Guardian ad litem presented her report, recommending that Ivy have no unsupervised contact with Cashin and limited, monitored visits with her father until he acknowledged the seriousness of the situation. Just before lunch recess, the mystery woman who had slipped into the courtroom earlier approached Mavis and whispered something. Mavis's eyes widened, and she immediately requested a brief conference with the judge. When proceedings resumed, Judge Harlow made an announcement. The court has been presented with additional evidence that requires review. We will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9. In the meantime, I'm issuing a temporary order. Ivy Wren is to have no contact with Cashin Faulkner or Judith Faulkner. Supervised visitation with Ronan Faulkner may continue at the Family Resource Center only. As we gathered our things to leave, I finally asked Mavis about the mystery woman. That, she said with a small smile, was Patricia Dunning, Judith's personal assistant for the last 8 years. She has copies of emails between Judith and the headmaster of Cashin's private school regarding 3 separate incidents of aggression against classmates, incidents that were handled quietly after generous donations to the school's building fund. She's willing to testify. I asked, stunned. Tomorrow morning. She said she couldn't live with herself anymore after seeing the security footage on the news last night. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, alerted by the viral blog post and subsequent news coverage. Judith brushed past them with a terse no comment, while Ronan ducked into a waiting car. I hesitated, unsure how to handle the attention. Mavis guided me through with a simple statement. We're grateful the court is giving this matter the serious attention it deserves. Our only concern is the welfare of a child who deserves to feel safe with all family members. That evening, I sat with Ivy on our back porch swing, watching fireflies emerge in the growing dusk. I'd explained, in age-appropriate terms, what had happened in court. Does this mean I never have to see Cashin again? She asked, her small voice hopeful. I don't know yet, sweetheart, I said, pulling her closer, but I promise you won't be alone with him ever again. She leaned against me, her body relaxing for the first time in weeks. I told Mrs. Bennet what was happening once, she confessed, her voice soft. She said I should tell you. But I was scared. Scared of what, honey? That no one would believe me. Grandma Judith always says I make things up. I hugged her close. I believe you, Ivy. I will always believe you. The next morning, as Patricia Dunning's testimony unfolded, I watched the Faulkners' lawyer grow increasingly desperate. He objected repeatedly, questioned her motives, even implied she had stolen private correspondence, tactics that only made Judge Harlow's expression grow sterner. By noon, the evidence was overwhelming. Judge Harlow called a brief recess before delivering her ruling. In the hallway outside, to my surprise, Ronan approached me alone. Delilah, he began, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. I need to say it. You had years to listen to Ivy. Years to protect her, I interrupted, my voice flat. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, I corrected him. There's a difference. His shoulders sagged. For a moment, I glimpsed the man I'd once loved, before his family's influence had corrupted him completely. What happens now, he asked. Now, I said quietly, you decide what kind of father you want to be. One who protects his daughter, or one who protects his mother's pride. When court resumed, Judge Harlow's ruling was decisive. Full temporary custody was granted to me, with Ronan allowed supervised visitation only after completing parenting classes and acknowledging the abuse. Judith and Cashin were subject to a no-contact order pending Cashin's completion of an intensive therapeutic program. This court takes the safety of children extremely seriously, Judge Harlow stated, her gaze sweeping over the Fallners. The evidence presents a disturbing pattern not just of a child's aggression, but of adults enabling and normalizing harm. This ends today. As we left the courthouse, the late afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the steps. Mavis hugged me tightly. "This is just the beginning," she whispered. "But it's a good beginning." On the drive home, my phone buzzed with notifications. The story had exploded beyond our small town, picked up by national outlets focusing on how wealth and power can shield abusers. I turned off my phone, unwilling to let the spotlight distract from what mattered most. My daughter was safe, and for the first time in years, she knew, without doubt, that her voice had been heard. 3 months after Judge Harlow's ruling, autumn had returned to Oregon, painting the landscape in fiery hues that matched the transformation in our lives. Ivy and I sat in Dr. Morgan's office for what would be our final required session under the court's orders. "I'd like to hear from both of you about the changes you've experienced," Dr. Morgan said, her kind eyes moving between us. Ivy, now more confident in expressing herself, spoke first. "I don't have bad dreams anymore." And I started raising my hand in class again. "That's wonderful," Dr. Morgan smiled. "What about at home?" "Mom and I have pizza and movie nights on Fridays, and I'm taking art classes on Saturdays." Her face brightened. "I drew a whole comic book about a girl superhero who can turn invisible, but decides to be seen." My heart swelled with pride at the progress she'd made. When it was my turn, I struggled to articulate the profound shift in our lives. "Everything's different," I said finally. "It's like we've both been holding our breath for years, and now we can exhale." Dr. Morgan nodded. "That's a common feeling after leaving an abusive dynamic. The body literally relaxes from a state of constant vigilance." After our session, we walked to a nearby cafe, a new tradition we'd established to mark these milestones. As Ivy enjoyed her hot chocolate, I checked my emails and found one from Mavis. "Final custody arrangement approved," it read. "Full legal and physical custody granted to you. Ronan declined his visitation rights." I felt a complex wave of emotions, relief, primarily, but also sadness for Ivy. Despite everything, Ronan was still her father, and his choice to step away rather than do the work to be in her life would leave its own scar. "Everything okay, Mom?" Ivy asked, a chocolate mustache adorning her upper lip. I smiled, pushing the complicated adult matters aside. "Everything's great. In fact, I think this calls for an extra cookie." While Ivy was preoccupied with her treat, I quickly checked the news on my phone. The Fallner saga continued to unfold in the public eye, though our names remained protected through court orders. Judith had stepped down from her charitable board positions, citing family health matters. Ronan had taken a leave of absence from the family firm. Most significantly, 3 more families had come forward with similar experiences involving Cashin, prompted by the Watson family's courage. But these larger repercussions felt distant from our daily reality. Our focus remained on healing and rebuilding. Ivy had started writing poetry in her language arts class, simple verses about bravery and truth that her teacher, Mrs. Bennett, particularly encouraged. "She has a natural gift for expressing complex emotions," Mrs. Bennett told me during a parent-teacher conference. "I think it's helping her process everything." My own work had evolved as well. What began as simple documentation of our journey had grown into a blog with a modest but engaged following. I wrote about recognizing gaslighting in family dynamics, supporting children through trauma, and navigating a legal system that often favored those with resources. Each post sparked conversations that reinforced what Mavis had told me from the beginning. We were far from alone in this experience. One crisp October evening, as I worked on illustrations while Ivy completed her homework at the kitchen table, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Mavis standing there, clutching a bottle of wine and wearing an uncharacteristically jubilant expression. "We need to celebrate," she announced, stepping inside. After settling Ivy with her favorite movie in the living room, Mavis explained her excitement. The Watson case is going to trial. No settlement, no NDAs. They're going all the way. I thought they already settled years ago, I said, confused. They did, Mavis beamed, but after everything that happened with your case, Mrs. Watson hired me to challenge the legality of the confidentiality agreement on the grounds that it concealed ongoing danger to other children. And the judge agreed. The original settlement is nullified. The implications were enormous. Without the protection of secrecy, the Faulkners' systematic cover-ups would be exposed in open court. There's more, Mavis continued, practically bouncing with excitement. I've been offered a partnership at the firm. They want me to head a new division focused exclusively on child advocacy cases. I hugged her tightly. No one deserves it more. You changed our lives. No, she corrected gently. You changed your lives. I just helped with the legal parts. The following week brought news that Cashin had been enrolled in a specialized boarding school in Vermont, known for its therapeutic approach to children with behavioral issues. According to Patricia Dunning, who had maintained contact with Mavis, the decision came after an incident during a family therapy session where Cashin had become violent when confronted about his actions. It should have happened years ago, Patricia told us over coffee. But Judith couldn't bear the thought of anyone seeing her golden boy as flawed. I felt no satisfaction in Cashin's struggles, only hope that he would finally receive the intervention he needed before his patterns became permanently entrenched. He was, after all, still a child, shaped by the dysfunctional adults around him. In late November, Ivy's teacher entered her poem, I'm Not Sorry, into a statewide contest for elementary students. When the email arrived announcing she'd won first place in her age group, Ivy danced around our kitchen, her joy infectious. They want to publish it in a real book, Mom, she exclaimed, with other kids' poems. The poem was simple, but powerful, 8 lines about finding her voice and refusing to apologize for taking up space in the world. Reading it, I saw not just healing, but transformation. Ivy wasn't merely recovering from trauma, she was forging it into something beautiful and strong. The award ceremony was scheduled for December at the state capitol. As we made plans to attend, I received an unexpected email from Ronan, the first direct communication since he declined his visitation rights. I've been in therapy, he wrote. I'm beginning to understand how much damage my family's dynamics have caused. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I'm finally facing the truth. Congratulations to Ivy on her poetry award. She deserves every good thing. I didn't respond immediately, unsure what place, if any, Ronan should have in our lives moving forward. That decision would require careful consideration of Ivy's needs above all else. The day before the poetry ceremony, a heavy envelope arrived from Mavis's office. Inside was the final court order, officially documenting the termination of the Faulkners' access to Ivy, along with a personal note from Judge Harlow. Your courage has already protected other children, she wrote. Never doubt that speaking up was the right choice. That night, as I tucked Ivy into bed, she asked a question that caught me off guard. Mom, is Cashin ever going to say sorry for hurting me? I sat on the edge of her bed, considering how to answer truthfully while honoring her need for closure. I don't know, sweetheart. Sometimes people aren't ready to face the wrong things they've done. She nodded thoughtfully. That's okay. I don't need a sorry anymore. I know it wasn't my fault. I kissed her forehead, marveling at her wisdom. That's right. It was never your fault. As she drifted off to sleep, I stood in her doorway, watching her peaceful face. The journey had been brutal, but the outcome, this child, safe and confident in her worth, was worth every battle. The next morning, as we prepared for the poetry ceremony, I received a text from Patricia. Judith announced retirement today. Stepping down from family business completely. The empire is crumbling. I felt no triumph, only relief that the power that had once seemed so insurmountable had finally met its limits. Justice hadn't come in the form of punishment, but in the restoration of truth and the protection of the vulnerable. At the ceremony, Ivy stood tall at the microphone, her voice clear as she read her poem to the audience. Looking at her, brave, resilient, and newly confident, I realized we had both been transformed. The quiet mother who once doubted her instincts had found her voice alongside her daughter. As we drove home through the winter twilight, Ivy clutched her award certificate and yawned. "I'm proud of us, Mom," she said sleepily. "Me too, baby," I whispered. "Me too." Spring arrived with a gentle persistence, coaxing new growth from winter-hardened ground. In the 6 months since Ivy's Poetry Award, our lives had settled into a rhythm that felt both ordinary and miraculous after the turbulence we'd weathered. I stood at my easel by the window, adding final touches to an illustration of a young girl releasing paper lanterns into a night sky. The piece was part of a children's book about finding courage, my first major project since refocusing my career. My phone buzzed with a text from Mavis. "Check your email." Urgent, but good. I smiled, accustomed to my friend's enthusiastic communication style. Since becoming partner at her firm, Mavis had channeled her formidable energy into building the child advocacy division into a force within the regional legal community. The email contained a formal invitation, keynote speaker request, Pacific Northwest Conference on Emotional Abuse and Protective Parenting. "They want me to speak," I murmured in disbelief. My blog had grown beyond my wildest expectations, evolving from personal catharsis into a resource for parents navigating similar waters. The comment section had become a community of support for families dealing with gaslighting, bullying, and the complex legal systems meant to protect children. Still, speaking at a professional conference felt like a leap into unknown territory. As I contemplated the invitation, Ivy burst through the front door, backpack bouncing, a wide smile on her face. "Mom, Mrs. Bennett says they're publishing my poem in a real literary journal. Not just a contest book, a real one that goes to libraries." I set aside my own news to celebrate hers. "That's incredible, honey." "Which poem?" "I'm Not Sorry," she said proudly. "And they want me to write a little paragraph about what inspired it." We sat at the kitchen table with notebooks and colored pens, our tradition for important writing projects, and worked together on her author's statement. At 10 years old, her birthday had passed in January. Ivy had developed a thoughtfulness that sometimes caught me off guard. "I want to say it's for kids who get told to be quiet," she said, chewing her pencil eraser. "But I don't want to sound mad." "You can be truthful without being angry," I suggested. "What's the most important thing you learned?" She considered this. "That feeling bad when someone hurts you doesn't mean you did something wrong." Her simple wisdom brought tears to my eyes. "That's perfect, Ivy." "Right. Exactly that." Later that evening, after Ivy was asleep, I called Mavis to discuss the conference invitation. "You have to do it," she insisted. "Your perspective is unique. You're not a therapist or a lawyer. You're a mother who found her way through the maze. People need to hear that voice." "What would I even say?" I asked, doubt creeping in. "The truth," Mavis replied simply. "Just like you've been doing all along." 2 weeks later, an email arrived from a publishing agent who had discovered my blog. "Your writing on family dynamics and healing resonates deeply with readers," she wrote. "I believe there's a book here that could help countless families. Would you consider a proposal?" The opportunities arriving now seemed surreal compared to where we'd been a year earlier, isolated, doubted, and fighting a system that favored the powerful. Yet each step had followed naturally from the one before. The documentation that became a blog, the blog that found an audience, the audience that created community. I accepted both the speaking engagement and the book proposal, sensing that our experience had purpose beyond our own healing. If our story could illuminate the path for even one family trapped in similar darkness, the pain would transform into something meaningful. Spring melted into summer, and with it came an unexpected email from Ronan. He had completed intensive therapy and was requesting a monitored meeting, not with Ivy, but with me. "I understand if you refuse," he wrote. "But I have things I need to say for my own accountability, if nothing else." After consulting with Dr. Morgan, I agreed to meet at a neutral coffee shop downtown. The man who arrived was both familiar and unrecognizable Ronan's features, but without the arrogance and defensiveness that had defined him for so long. "Thank you for coming," he said, hands wrapped around his coffee mug. "I've been working through a lot in therapy, understanding how my mother's influence shaped my behavior, my values, my failures as a father and husband. I waited, neither encouraging nor discouraging his confession. I should have protected Ivy, he continued. I should have stood up to my mother years ago, not just about Cashin, but about how she treated you, how she taught me to treat you. He met my eyes directly. I'm not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. I just want you to know I finally see the truth. What about Cashin? I asked. Have you had any contact with him? Ronan nodded. He's still at the therapeutic school. His counselors say he's making progress, but it's slow. Years of being told his behavior was acceptable created deep patterns. He paused. I visit him monthly. I'm trying to model something different than what my mother showed him. As we talked, I realized Ronan was genuinely changed. Not completely healed, but awakened to truths he'd spent a lifetime denying. Still, when he cautiously asked about seeing Ivy again, I was clear. Being a father isn't genetic, Ronan. It's earned through consistent care and protection. If you want a relationship with Ivy someday, you'll need to prove you've truly changed over time. He accepted this without argument, perhaps the most convincing evidence of his transformation. By late summer, my illustration work had taken a new direction. The emotional depth of our journey had infused my art with an authenticity clients responded to. I was commissioned to create a series of images for a children's hospital, scenes of courage, hope, and healing that would decorate the walls of the pediatric wards. Ivy, too, was flourishing. She'd begun volunteering at a community art center, helping younger children with projects while developing her own skills. Her first mural, a collaborative piece with other young artists, depicted a girl holding a glowing lantern that illuminated a path through a dark forest. When the director asked about the symbolism, Ivy explained, sometimes you have to make your own light to find your way out. The Child Advocacy Center where Ivy had received therapy invited me to join their parent advisory board, where I helped shape programs for families navigating the aftermath of various forms of abuse. Working alongside professionals who had once guided us through our darkest days felt like completing a circle, from help to helper. In September, I received word that Judith Faulkner had been quietly removed from the boards of several prominent family foundations following the public settlement of the Watson lawsuit. The family's carefully constructed facade of philanthropic virtue had crumbled under the weight of revealed truth. I took no pleasure in their downfall, but I celebrated the cultural shift it represented. Powerful families could no longer count on silence and intimidation to shield them from consequences. The week before my keynote speech at the conference, I received a surprising invitation from Patricia Dunning. She had left the Faulkners' employment and accepted a position with a nonprofit focused on family healing, ironically, an organization once heavily funded by Judith's donations. They needed someone who understands how abuse can hide behind privilege, she explained over lunch. And I needed to use what I witnessed for something good. The conference itself was both terrifying and exhilarating. Standing before a room of therapists, lawyers, judges, and parents, I shared our story, not as victims, but as witnesses to a truth larger than ourselves. That protecting children requires adults willing to stand firm against powerful systems designed to maintain the status quo. The most dangerous words I ever heard, I told the audience, were she provoked him and apologized for upsetting him. Those words taught my daughter that her pain was less important than a boy's anger, that being hurt was her fault. It took every ounce of courage I had to say no more. The standing ovation that followed was overwhelming, but the conversations afterward, with parents who saw their own struggles reflected in ours, were what truly mattered. One evening in late October, exactly 1 year after Judge Harlow's final ruling, Ivy asked if we could go stargazing. We drove to a quiet spot outside town, spread a blanket on the grass, and laid back to watch the vast canopy of stars emerge. Do you ever think about them? Ivy asked after a long, comfortable silence. Grandma Judith and Dad in Cashin? Sometimes, I admitted. I hope they're healing in their own ways. She nodded thoughtfully. Mrs. Bennett says holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to get sick. I smiled in the darkness. That's pretty wise. I'm not angry anymore, she said. Just I don't know. Glad we're here instead of there. I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. Me too. As shooting stars streaked across the October sky, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this peaceful moment. From the frightened mother who once doubted her own perceptions, to the woman who had found her voice by defending her child's right to safety and truth. It hadn't been about revenge or even justice in the conventional sense. It had been about restoration, rebuilding what had been broken, reclaiming what had been stolen, the right to say no, the courage to be believed, the freedom to heal. Beside me, Ivy pointed excitedly at a particularly brilliant meteor. Her profile in the starlight showed a confidence that hadn't existed a year ago. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew with bone-deep certainty that she would face them standing tall, never again apologizing for taking up space in the world. "Make a wish," I whispered. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with a smile. Already did. I didn't ask what she'd wished for. Some things don't need to be spoken aloud to be perfectly understood. As we packed up our blanket and headed home, Ivy hummed softly beside me. The tune was from a song she'd been working on in music class. Something about finding light in darkness. The night sky stretched endlessly above us, stars illuminating the road ahead. They had told her to say sorry for being hurt. I had taught her never to be sorry for speaking up. And in that truth, we had both found our way forward, one brave step at a time. When was the last time you stayed silent to keep the peace, only to realize your voice was the very weapon you needed? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.